Hi, Kate. How are you?
Hi, Ruby. I'm doing great. How about you?
Yeah, I'm really great. It's just nice and sunny where I am. Thank you for too and for being our guest speaker for this episode. Can you please tell us what you do?
Sure. My name's Kate, and I am known as the abortion queen of the South here outside of Atlanta. I have a podcast, YouTube channel, TikTok, Instagram, and I'm a content creator. I might even be getting some platforms, but I also volunteer as a clinic escort, and I'm an activist here. I'm also very involved in local politics and work for a local political candidate who's very passionate about women's rights. So this is definitely something that is my life's work.
I know, and I love that. I love your passion whenever I see your and I understand that it is a really huge issue right now happening in the States. So, can you please walk us through your day in escort? What happens?
Sure. So basically, when we get there, I usually give myself an hour because with traffic, as I live outside of Atlanta with traffic, I like to be safe. So basically, I drive up. Usually, I get there around 7:30. I have a vest from a previous clinic. I've actually got it over there, and well, it's gonna be audio, so it's safe. If I needed to, I can show it to you. But I have my vest. I put it on. I have my everything. Get it ready to go. I go check in with Miss Tracy, our head of security. And then I basically go down to our parking lot and escort patients up and down the stairs. We do have, I used to volunteer in Greenville, the Greenville Women's Clinic, and they're an amazing group, but something just opened up closer to home. And we do have protesters. Right now it's Lent, so we have a lot of Catholics. They aren't terribly obnoxious, but they're still obnoxious. Then we also have a group of evangelicals, all men, who like to protest outside of the clinic and harass patients. They basically will do street preaching. They'll try to record patients. I just stand in the way because I'm tall enough. I can just stand there and be like, okay, cool, record me. And our main protester is named Jason Cantrell. He is a convicted felon. He is known for being very violent. He is smart enough to have never put his hands on me. But he is very nasty and aggressive with us, with protesters. And I generally just try to make sure that our patients feel safe. I remind them that Jason is a fucking, am I allowed to swear?
I swear all the
Yeah.
time.
Okay. Jason's a fucking idiot and he's not going anywhere. I remind, and I tell our patients, I'm like, hey, like, these people are no good. Leave them alone. Occasionally, we will have partners that will get mad at our protesters and try to start shit with them. I usually have to be like, hey, no, get your ass back here. So we're gonna have. I usually just go, hey, come with me, talk to me, let's have a conversation. Sometimes we have patients that are. I've had to hold hands with a patient. I've had a patient cry in my arms, so it can be taxing and stressful, but it's also very rewarding. So
Yeah, I
a
mean,
lot of it making sure that our patients are comfortable despite these obnoxious, ridiculous protesters. Most of them don't really seem to be bothered, but sometimes they can be scared. Our state laws here where I live, we have a 6-week ban on abortion with very few exceptions. So, for example, our local hospital, Grady, will actually send patients to our clinic for miscarriage care
mm,
because we're better equipped to handle it.
yeah.
Yeah. So we also get patients from out of states. We've had patients from as far away as Louisiana, which is about a 10-hour. New Orleans is about a 10-hour drive. So a lot of the time, we never know what the patient's going through, what's going on. Some of them like to antagonize protesters. Most of them just kind of ignore them and sit in their cars or go sit in our waiting room. But, we've also had an incident where somebody pulled a gun on one of our protesters because he decided to insult his lady and his truck, which is just not a smart idea. Luckily, no one got hurt. Police didn't get called, but it's just it's very unpredictable with how things can go. So we have to be very alert.
Yes, that sounds way more intense than I was expecting. this having this idea of your safety being compromised must be such a taxing and emotionally exhausting experience to have as one of those main challenges from anti-abortion protesters. Do you kind of agree with that?
I do, but I think at the end of the day, for me personally, and it's something, I mean, I've warned people about that I've recruited. I'm like, look, some of these people, like, they're crazy. Don't engage with them. At some clinics, they do engage. There's definitely a way you can do it. But the best thing to do is they just need attention. They want attention. They want their soundbite. They want you to flip them the bird or hit them or like, heaven forbid, this guy pulled a gun on them. I saw the whole video on our protester Facebook account. So, you know, that does happen. Generally speaking, we do have a very good head of security. Our security team is amazing. And we can diffuse situations. Our head of security is retired law enforcement, and she's so freaking cool. So, and generally speaking, as long as your partners are like, no, we're not doing this thing. Like I've had to just do that with partners because there's one guy who he tried to get in his face, and I'm like, no, get that. I'm like, no, come here, we're gonna have a conversation. And I said, here's what's gonna happen. If your partner's in surgery, and I think sometimes if it's a surgical abortion here, generally speaking, it's probably something fairly serious, like mom or baby, really, for us to actually be able to do it legally. But for him, I was like, dude, like you're gonna go to jail. You're gonna catch a case. Your partner's not gonna have a ride, and she needs you here. She doesn't need you doing that. I was like, can you go get food right now or go do something? He's like, well, they told me I can't leave. And then our head of security and I were like, hey, you need to go to the waiting room and just chill out. And he eventually did, but because of how litigious American society is, if they sue somebody and they get money, it's a win for them. If they can say, hey, they call us death escorts, which is hilarious. These death escorts are trying to do XYZ, blah, blah, blah. Give us money to save babies. They love that. If you get in their face, like as a patient, yeah, it's kind of hilarious, but they love that shit. So
Yeah, of course I would.
I mean, now you can troll them. I mean, at my old clinic, I will say if you are going to engage with them, if you're at a clinic that allows that, if you kind of troll them and you just are very distracting, that can also be effective because you don't want them to have any power. But generally speaking, they're really nice talking to. They have like the same 5 talking points. These people are serial killers. Don't go in there. You need to save your baby. We'll adopt your baby. You do not want these people adopting your child. Um, you're gonna go to hell if you do this. Like it's the same like 5 talking points. You almost memorize what they say because I'm like, dude, like, can you at least spice it up a bit? There's one guy who's like 70 and he goes, well, I can't have a baby. And I'm like, yeah, bro, you're shooting blanks. Well, I'm surprised you're still here. So it's dude, I'm like, I'm surprised you're still here. Like you're an old man. Go home, go garden, like so it's definitely something you're mindful of, but at the end of the day, I have never had any big issues. Like besides a few partners are getting upset or a few patients getting upset, because sometimes one time it was a situation of why she was there. Long story short, her and her partner, this was back when I was in Greenville, had agreed to have children, and I think she was fairly young. And then the minute she got pregnant, he dipped. So she had always wanted to be a mom. She was just really sad. She's like, I've always wanted to be a mom, but like I cannot take care of a kid. I was like, well, you'll meet the right one eventually. This is just not your guy. And I said, if you don't do this, that's valid. But if you do, then there's nothing wrong with that. And I guess poor woman just cried in my arms. I felt so bad for her. And I wanted to go punch this guy in the face. And then the other time, sometimes it's just like we've had patients at my clinic who just like the protesters are screaming, I'm nervous, I'm tired, I'm stressed. Everything is happening, and I'm just overstimulated, and I'm just like breaking down. Like I've had that happen too. So it's just, you just have to be really calm and just be like, hey, we're gonna get you in, we'll help you get your procedure, you're fine, like you're good to go. Because most patients it's not a big thing, but for some it is. And you don't know what that person's gone through. So you have to be compassionate.
Yeah, and yes, and I completely agree with that idea of being like with having to be that compassion, which I think is a really beautiful segue into our next question. So, fake abortion or crisis pregnancy centers often disguise themselves as genuine healthcare providers. What deceptive techniques have found out they use to manipulate people who are pregnant?
Oh gosh, they can do a lot. And under state law here in Georgia, our tax dollars pay for it, which is horrifying. There actually is legislation that likely isn't going to pass this year, but hopefully will next year about fake clinics. However, one thing that they will do is they'll basically, not where I live, but where I used to volunteer in Greenville, it was called the Piedmont Women's Center. It was literally across the street from the clinic. All it takes is someone making a wrong turn there all the time. And then they go in and, oh yeah, we'll take you in for the appointment. They get in there and then they just start feeding them religious propaganda. And a lot of them will do that. I've heard of people getting locked in, they get shamed, they proselytize, and they try to be misleading. And even then, there was a case it was like within the last year or two, where there was one in Kentucky where the woman had discovered one of the nurses had these probes, like some sort of probe to do medical procedures with, and people got infected with HIV because they were expired. So, and also to become an ultrasound tech in a lot of states, you don't really need significant licensing either. So there are people who've had ectopic pregnancies, which can kill you. They go in and like, oh yeah, your baby's good to go. And then they're in the hospital, like, yeah, you need an abortion because you're gonna die. So the biggest thing in the US to look for in regards to whether it's a legit clinic, look for protest. Look for people with signs standing outside. If they're going to try to stop your car, you just need to keep driving. They may try to jump in front of your car. Do not hit one of them, but know that they will probably move. I mean, it can be, I think for some people it can be kind of scary, but the biggest indicator of actual clinic is going to be protesters. Because they like to be out there. A lot of them are paid. A lot of them have grifts where they will say that they're saving babies. And then they show up with like our main protester, Jason. He every year goes to New Orleans for Mardi Gras and he does the street preaching and he gets daiquiris and God knows what thrown on his very expensive sound equipment. So afterward, he gets used to it because he guilts people into donating. At our clinic back in Greenville, they had a ladder where they had a big hill. They would literally haul this ladder up there, try to peek over the fence and scream at patients. We've had them say, oh, we need to go get a new ladder. So they raised however much money for a new ladder. They still haven't bought the new ladder. I wonder why. Where did that money go? So, long story short, as far as fake clinics, the best thing to do is make sure you're at the right place, look for protesters. And generally speaking, there are clinic reports. Not all clinics have them, but look for, usually they're like rainbow or pink fests, depending on where you go. Planned Parenthood is always pink. If you're at an independent clinic, it'll be rainbow, or there's some sort of like multicolored pattern. It will say clinic escort. You see that, you're in the right place. And you can always also just call and be like, hey, is this the right place for my appointment? Let me know. Usually there's some sort of security. At our clinic, you're not allowed in if you don't have an appointment. And you're not allowed to do things like you can't bring in big bags. You can't do certain things. If you can just walk in, it's probably not a real clinic. There are some exceptions, like my old clinic in Greenville. If you were there before noon, they'd let you in, you'd get your appointment, and they'd usually let you out. But generally speaking, there's going to be some sort of security because we have had accidents that have escalated in recent years. It's as long as I can remember, even back in the 90s with Eric Rudolph, he bombed in, I want to say it was Montgomery, Alabama. He's doing time in our most secure prison in the US. And it would, unless our president decides to pardon him, which I don't think he's quite that stupid or sadistic. Who knows? He is in solitary confinement 24/7 because he's that dangerous. So these, shit happens. So they have to be secure. So definitely look for protesters and some sort of security.
Yeah, those are really great points. And so security, and also what you mentioned about this, the idea of even having these licensed technicians, I guess, for maybe like lying or spinning the truth about encourage to continue a pregnancy into long term is a sign of reproductive coercion, which is why I wanted to talk to you, because that is actually a really growing topic in Australia, unfortunately. So, in your experience, can you explain what reproductive coercion looks like in real life situations?
And I can give a few examples. Reproductive coercion is when someone is trying to either tamper with your birth control, or they're trying to force you to get an abortion, or to stay pregnant. Either one of those is terrible. There was somebody I dated who tried to do that with me. He tried to basically get me to agree to have children. He found out, and it was not a fun conversation, that I can't have my own children. And needless to say, we broke up, and I don't know or care what he's doing. But I've heard of people, there's someone I know who she was raped repeatedly until she got pregnant and then had to get an abortion because she was in a domestic violence case or a situation. There are people who will get their birth control tampered with. There was a woman who was at the hearing for a potential state of ban. I don't think it's going to pass, but she had been raped, and her partner and his mother, I think they were teenagers, were basically telling her she had to have an abortion or else. And she was like, no, I'm not doing it. And she, for whatever reason, decided to keep her baby, and it was incredibly traumatic. So people, regardless, they do not have an input on what you have to do with your body. And that is one form of control. I know I've seen this not in recent years. This has been a conversation here as well, but people there was somebody, it was years ago, in the last 5 or 10 years, there was somebody, and it was a big thing here. He basically was throwing away his girlfriend's birth control. And I'm thinking that, and some people are like, oh, that's hilarious because he wants a baby. I'm like, no, that's fucked up. Like, this guy is crazy. What people don't realize is that behavior will escalate, and they might try to play it off, but it's not okay. Same where if he doesn't want to wear a condom, then don't sleep with him. It's not worth it. And that's reproductive coercion as well. So that is a very valid form of abuse.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't realize until I was doing research into how, I guess, very crimes or types of bad circumstances are actually all coercion, like stealthing as well. Even I guess even more frankly, the whole of women might say to a guy like, oh, we don't need a condom, I'm on birth control, and they're not, etc., which has also been a very common case as well, that these types of things that aren't considered reproductive coercion or even abuse actually are. And it's quite scary, but also so insightful, happening all the time, and we don't realize it.
And in some cultures, it's very normalized too. And in some, certain backgrounds, it's very normalized. It's like, oh, look, this guy's being guy. No, it's not. If you don't want to get pregnant, I'd also say, get on contraceptives. I use an IUD, and I have hormonal birth control that I get very cheaply to help with some other female issues. And it's very, I'm sure in Australia too, it's very readily available in the US, and I'm sure Australia. A lot of people, ever since the adoption stage, have been getting sterilized. Quite a few men have gotten vasectomies. I know somebody who, his wife, her birth control's not covered by her insurance. And he said, well, I guess I'm gonna go get my balls chopped off. I don't think that's what you do in a vasectomy, but he's like, I'm not paying, $80 a month without when I can just get it done and she can be fine. So make sure you're protected as well. And then just, if your partner isn't being considerate about that, they're not someone you want to be with, because nothing is going to go well. Like, it's going to just get worse.
Yeah, I completely understand. And trying to look on the bright side here, do you think right now regarding reproductive care is helping people maybe become more invested in their sexual and reproductive care?
I think so, absolutely. In the US, not just for women, but for men as well, the number of vasectomies, as I mentioned, skyrocketed. The number of women deciding to get sterilized skyrocketed because they don't want to have children. I know that in the US, we have these draconian laws in most states, including, and in some states, like we have a 6-week ban. So you've got about 2 weeks to basically make an appointment, find a doctor, etc. If you know you're pregnant. I know some people who they didn't, I mean, generally by that point, a lot of women don't necessarily know, but it's kind of, you may not. But then again, I know somebody who she didn't know because she was like, until she was like 20 weeks along. So that's kind of a different situation, but I think it is how people are having that conversation. And I think that people are definitely utilizing more resources. I know that's not what I think people thought things would go differently when the Dobbs decision came down here, but the number of abortions has actually gone up for the first time in many years because people don't really like being told what to do with their bodies or when to have children. And most people here, I mean, with our economy, which is just going to get worse, like, let's be real, people here already could not afford children. Most people who have an abortion already have a child, at least one child. They're already parents. The number one reason people are getting abortions is because they cannot, either it's not the right time or they cannot afford to take care of a child. So I think a lot of people are being more proactive. And I think just with everything that's going on here, I know people who desperately wanted children. And some people are going to, I have a friend who she's always wanted to be a mom. She would be high risk, but she's like, you know what? I'm going to take that chance, which is her, I support. That's her business. But there are a lot of people who are like, I desperately wanted to have children, but because of my medical situation, or just out of fear, I'm not going to, because these laws here are so bad and so draconian. I mean, we have a woman who's in Tifton, Georgia right now, who was found bleeding and unconscious, that's in jail because she had a miscarriage. And when people hear these horror stories, they're like, yeah, I don't want to deal with that. We've had multiple high profile cases out of other states where people have been arrested or investigated for miscarriages. There's a woman in Louisiana who, I think it was like a year or two ago, her baby didn't even have a head. And they were like, well, under state law, you can't have an abortion here. And she had to go out of state. There were cases in Texas, multiple over this, I think it was last year. It gets hard because there are many where women have nearly died. I know somebody in Idaho, she nearly died when she miscarried. We've had, I think, 2 or 3 women in my home state die because of these laws. So it's sad, but also people are taking notice and they're just going, do I really want to even take these risks? Because I'll
Yeah,
tell you right now, it's just not worth it.
yes, and two things there, two great insights. What you mentioned about, abortions, I think is a really great insight into breaking that stereotype that majority of people are having abortions. It's valid both ways if they don't want to have a child to abort, but also there are so abortions who do want children, which I think is never really talked about a lot too, of like having an abortion in the first place, but also having one when you don't technically want one, but you kind of have to for whatever reason. And also just in the first place, it's so complex, the reason why so many people have abortions, that I feel it just gets stereotyped into such a distinct, shallow thought to most
Yeah,
people.
it definitely does. And I mean, the one that I've talked to many older women who had abortions, including people that I know very well who are like in their 70s now, and they're like, yeah, my husband and I have been married for over 50 years, and that wouldn't have happened if I hadn't have had my abortion and I wouldn't have my children. That's the most common response I hear from children, older women. Or, you know what, if had I not had my abortion, I wouldn't have been able to finish school or do what I need to do to be successful. And a lot of people don't realize that. Plus, birth control fails all the time. In the US, we have Plan B, which is generally effective, but if you're over like a certain weight, so if you're somebody like me who's taller and curvier and you take it, there's a good chance it's probably not, it's less effective. Now, there is another contraceptive called Ella that's on the market as well, which is more effective, but a lot of people don't know that. Birth control fails all the time. I know somebody who got pregnant because she forgot to take her pill one day, and she's in her late 30s and was told that she likely couldn't have kids. So you never know the person's situation. That person might be trying everything. I have a friend who, I mean, she ended up with 4 kids that she loves and adores, and both her and her ex-husband had to get sterilized because if he sneezed on her, she would get pregnant. So
Mm.
some people, you never know. Some people are just really fertile. I've met a few of those, and they just, you never know what someone's situation is. And I think there's less of a stigma now, but I do think that it's because people are speaking up, because there are things I didn't know when I was younger that I know now. And you don't realize how common abortions are until you start doing this work, because I've had so many people say, hey, I had to have an abortion. One of our state legislators had to have an abortion when and she had a child and was pregnant in her late 30s, and she already had young children at home, and she testified about this, and she said, yeah, I had to have an abortion because I had little kids at home. And the doctor said, if you try, this baby's not going to live. And if you don't do something, you're not going to either. And she said, yeah, I had to put my kids first. A lot of people don't realize that. I mean, there are hard. I know people who've had to have an abortion at 6 months because their baby, they had issues in their pregnancy. That's not necessarily super common, but you don't know that person's situation. I know somebody who's there's somebody I talked to once who she's had like, I think 20 plus miscarriages because she had cancer when she was younger, and it messed up her reproductive organs. So you hear all sorts of stuff. That's why, and I had to go check one of my male friends on this. I was like, well, you don't know that person's situation. I said, what if that happened? He said, wait, well, that's different. I said, well, yeah, that happens. I said, what if that person is raped every day and not allowed to use birth control and is somehow getting people are not using it as birth control. Maybe they did at one point in history, but that's not happening. Abortions, I mean, especially with birth control now. I mean, why would you pay like 500 to 1,000 for an abortion? And that's the low end.
Yeah, exactly. And that, yeah, exactly. And I think that is not talked about enough, full impact that abortions have on the human, but like on the female body, sorry, human body, especially competitively. Like I know in Australia now, like pill medical abortions are only available up until 6 weeks, and then from 6 weeks
Wow,
onwards,
that's
you have to,
early.
yeah, you have to have a DNC because of the amount of blood issues. There were so many women who had the medical abortion that were just bleeding out long term. The
Oh,
way that it impacted their reproductive system.
do you know which pills they used out of curiosity? I'm wondering if it's the same one as ours. Because we have
Oh, it
misoprostol.
starts with
Is it
yeah,
one
it
or
was the two.
okay, yeah, because we have it here, and I mean, it's been tested here and it's safer than Tylenol, but you can only do it up to a certain point.
So it's the two here. Um But what was happening was they found that after 6 weeks, the women was taking the two, their chances of having internal bleeding after the dispelling was, now it's like the two pills up until 6 weeks, and then from 6 weeks onwards you have to get the
Yeah.
DNC option,
Yeah,
which,
they
and
do.
both of those have huge physical damage on the body as well. So I don't understand why people are like, oh, people are using this as birth control, when abortions are just naturally not an easy process.
I mean, it's very expensive here. I mean, we have funds that, I mean, let's say you live in Alabama, which is next door to Georgia, like where I live. Let's say you are within a 6 week period, you can make the drive. Let's say you live like a couple hours from where I am in Atlanta. Okay, cool. You're gonna either get up at the butt crack of dawn, get there by like 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning for a procedure. You're gonna have to spend money on gas, maybe a hotel room, maybe childcare, food, all those expenses plus the abortion. I mean, that could easily be a couple grand right there. And if you're from somewhere like, let's say Louisiana, you're probably gonna have to get a hotel room. You might have to get a flight. If you're in a state like Texas, you're probably gonna have to fly somewhere, or you're gonna be on a hell of a road trip. So a lot of people don't realize that. Like, even and in some states you have mandatory waiting periods. Like, I think ours is 24 hours. I'm not sure off the top of my head. But it could be like, hey, you have to wait X number of days and you have to do X, Y, and Z, blah, blah, blah. A lot of these laws are really just stupid. And they're passed to try to make people from having abortions. I mean, there are definitely there are ways to get abortion pills by mail through an organization called Plan C. Some people do go that route. It's legal federally, but some states kind of depends on where you are. So there are options, but it's not either way, it's not going to be like it's not worth it for birth control. So most people, I mean, I'm not saying it never happens, but it's probably not. Like, it's if it is, it's a very percentage, like less than 1%. It is, especially as it gets more difficult here. I
Yeah, exactly. Oh, wait, sorry, my cats are fighting. Recording now. All right, beautiful. So I guess the final question is increasing restrictions in abortion access, both in the US, but also here as well. So last year in Queensland, because each state and territory has different laws. So in Queensland, one of our premiers was trying to pass a law that made abortions illegal after 2 weeks.
What?
Luckily, that did pass. Yeah, not pass, thank gosh. But it was a tipping point in Australia to highlight what kind of restrictions we might be seeing in the future, and what, I guess, the opinion of abortion is here. So, what advice do you have for people seeking reproductive care?
I would say to make sure you find legitimate resources. I Need an A is where to look in the US. I'm sure there are Australian resources here. And make sure
Mm.
that you know what to do. There's also, if you do have any legal questions or need legal representation, there's a group called If, When, How, where they have pro bono attorneys that help patients. So the biggest thing I will say is to just know that you do have access to care. And I know these politicians and a lot of these people think that they can just tell you what to do. They really can't. They can do what they want to do, but unless something is written into law, they can't, there's not much they can do besides run their mouth. And from an activist standpoint, I think a word of warning just from the US. I was told for years, oh, the Republicans are never going to do anything. Their no Roe v. Wade isn't going anywhere. Well, after 50 years, it did in 2022. And the consequences have been horrific. So you have to take anything seriously. I don't know how your process in Australia works, but if you can, make sure if there's a politician who's doing stuff like that, do whatever you can to help them get voted out. Have conversations with people and say, hey, don't vote for this guy. Because it's easy to blow off rhetoric. It's easy to say, oh, this isn't a threat, but that's what we did, and look where the US is now. That could easily be Australia. That could easily be, I know in Germany, there were people who were getting passports because they were so terrified of the far right party there. So that's one message I have, that I think whether it's Australia or anywhere else, you have to take these people seriously. A lot of the ones here, they don't come off as very smart. A lot of them are very smart. And they come off as total crazy loons, but you have to treat them as a threat, because they I understand that, like, it is literally delusion for them. Like, what they want is the Handmaid's Tale. They want women at home. They have openly said women should not vote, women should not be in public view, women should have to be married and serving their spouse, things like that. They will pass laws, and it won't be like all at once. They will start chipping away at everything. So you have to do your best to stop it in its tracks, because otherwise you're going to be in a mess like we are here in the US. And while I'm cautiously optimistic, that can happen anywhere.
Yeah.
And women are the first people that they're going to try to control, because that's half the population. That's what they did in Romania under the dictatorship there. That's what they did in Nazi Germany. That's why they use things like rape as a weapon of war. Because if you control half the women, you're controlling half the population. If you can keep women down, and you can keep women pregnant, you can keep women traumatized, that is half the population. This is going to sound like a terrible thing to say, but if you're a dictator, oh, that's the easiest way to go. But definitely just do what you can. And while you do want to exercise your faith as an activist, you also want to talk to other people. And it's frustrating. I've had some very frustrating conversations about abortion. And this can apply to other issues. I know here we have I have friends who are transgender here who are scared, and rightfully so, because of some of the laws. What you do is you just have to start kind of low and kind of meet their level. So it might be something like, let's say I'm talking to somebody from rural Georgia. Well, okay, you don't believe in abortion. What about in this? They'll usually start like, well, what if birth control fails? And then response could be, well, it's not the baby's fault. Maybe she should have been more responsible. Okay, like, we don't like that answer, but I'm like, okay, well, what about this area? What if someone's raped? Okay, and in most situations, people will be like, yeah, they should get an abortion. Okay, well, what if your daughter was raped? That gets a lot of, what if your wife's on their deathbed? 99% of people, you can get them to a yes. You just have to keep kind of moving goalposts with them in naming situation. And that's one thing I think you have to have conversations with people, and you have to have conversations with people you really may not want to have conversations with. And that's true. Any political activism, whether it's politics, activism, any social cause, you have to be able to have conversations with people and talk to them. And you have to understand, another thing to understand is you have to meet people where they're at. Because I'll tell you right now, I know it's probably the same in Australia, the average person is not that smart. They are not as informed. They go to work, they come home, they might scroll on social media, they'll watch some TV, drink a beer, take care of their kids, maybe they're married, and go to bed. That's their life. They don't have time to be in depth. And they're not going to go out and like study this stuff. They should. There's no reason not to. But the average person is going to do that. And it's frustrating to have to educate somebody, but sometimes you just have to. I mean, you'll want to pull your hair out sometimes, but you just have to do it.
I completely understand that and completely resonate with having these having these difficult conversations, but they are an essential in order to help people become more informed and more open-minded. I guess my final question for you, Cait, to end our episode, do you have any words of wisdom or comfort for our listeners right now who might be having fear or anxiety around their reproductive care?
Sure, I know we all do. I mean, myself included. What I would say is to just try to hang in there. I know things are terrifying for so many groups of people here in the US and I know across the world. And just try to just know that it's going to pass and you will get through it. It might pass like a kidney stone, but it will pass. And also just to try to be patient and just trust that things take time. Any change, like look at the other side here. They spent 50 years trying to get rid of Roe v. Wade and eventually succeeding, which was also very unpopular here, by the way. Most people did not want it. But I don't think it'll take 50 years for our rights to get restored here, but you have to be patient. It's not going to happen overnight. As somebody who's worked in politics and he's very active from a legislative perspective, and I'm sure it's similar in Australia, new laws take time. Changing attitudes takes time. I remember when I was a kid, like gay marriage here, there were plenty of, I grew up, I didn't know this at the time, but when I was 5 years old, we had two neighbors that were lesbians. Oh, welcome with open arms. One of my cousins is a lesbian. Welcome with open arms. Obviously, my parents had no issue with it. But there were plenty of people who were like, hey, I'm cool with that, but I'm not cool with people getting married with somebody of the same gender. Nowadays, it's not a big deal for the average American. No one, you could go to Podunk, Kentucky or Podunk, Georgia, and they're like, oh yeah, that's fine. Alan and Steve want to get married. That's their business. The average person doesn't care. But it takes time. And for attitudes to change time, the younger people are a lot more responsive. The older people, eventually we can get somewhere, but it's a little harder. And it's just normalizing those conversations, because what you don't want to happen is what's going on, I'm sure, all over the world. We're seeing this surge of people towards these right-wing spaces. I'm sure in Australia, there are people like Andrew Tate. There are people like all these Joe Rogan and Andrew Tate and all these far-right creators who are basically infiltrating online spaces and having these successful media companies and spewing God only knows what out into the internet and into the void. So we have to be just as loud and be just as vocal, even if it is scary. There are a lot of risks that I basically assume and have accepted could happen with my platforms and as an activist, but I think realistic. You need to still, it's worth it. The risk is worth it to me. So it's just making sure the conversations are happening. You're making sure that you're flooding, here it's called flooding with any of that information as much as possible. Counter, because I'll tell you right now, the other side, they're straight up. First off, they lie. Secondly, they've got no shame, and they have no sources either. But they will flood with anybody, and if you're literally have their back turned to them, they will still talk to you. You do not need to be that obnoxious, but you still have to have those conversations. So I'll tell you right now, the other side, one thing we can learn from them, there is no imposter syndrome whatsoever. They just spew their crap. And for us, we know it's not true, but we need to make sure that we're educating others as well. And if they're not receptive the first time, we'll try again later. It might take a few tries. So that's the one thing I would say, is just hang in there and be patient. Just know it's going to pass.
And a really beautiful way to end this episode. So thank you so much for your time. I've learnt and grown so much from our conversation.
Thank you so much for having me.